At Seven Oceans, you work closely with voyage management and chartering technology. So could you explain some of the key operational challenges in chartering and voyage planning that digital tools are helping to address today?
The way we look at it, for operators in the market, we stress on margin management, optimizing on those costs, day to day, and being able to play with the best outcomes.
How does improved access to data change the way charterers or operators and traders approach commercial decisions nowadays?
If you're in this business, you want to ensure that there is no leakage of your data, of what you're running. When we come in and focus on better decision making and changes in data, we want to ensure that there's total trade visibility.
Hello everyone, this is Manasi. Welcome to Maritime Dialogues, Gujarati Empire's global maritime podcast, a space where voices from the global maritime world share insights, experiences, and ideas shaping the future of the industry. Our guest today is Sitaraah, a commercial at Seven Oceans, a technology that powers shipping and cargo. Sitaraah has been recognized among the top 100 women in shipping, and her work focuses on maximizing voyage profitability and efficiency through intelligent commercial shipping software. Hi Sitaraah, how are you?
I'm very well, Manasi. How are you?
Welcome to Maritime Dialogues. I'm doing very well, thank you.
I appreciate you having me here. Super excited to be here.
Same here. I'm super excited to know about your journey, as I know our audience is equally excited to get to know all the insights, your experiences, and ideas that you have to share with us today.
Absolutely. Super appreciate it. And thanks to Aman as well for getting in touch.
So, Sitaraah, to begin with, let me tell you, I love your name.
Oh, thank you
and
so
you
much.
You look as dazzling as your name today.
Thank you. You're very kind.
So to begin with, could you walk us through your early journey, your academic background, the values you grew up with, and how those influences shaped the career choices you eventually made?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Manasi, I grew up in Singapore. A mixture of Singapore and a couple of other places like Connecticut, UK, because family spent a lot of time there. And that was sort of a third culture exposure, largely to the world. And I didn't really introduce myself to shipping markets until much later in life, right? I was completely clueless. But I grew up in Singapore, which is a very small, tiny island, as you know, but surprisingly has a lot of shipping exposure, right? And I was completely oblivious to that. Fast forward to later in life, I went to school in the UK. I did my undergraduate from LSE, studied there for a bit, and then I sort of forayed into financial markets. And I was in investment banking for a short time, and then pivoted into shipping and now technology in shipping. So that was sort of the growth journey. There was never a thought process in mind that, I want to end up in shipping. I never knew that it would happen. I didn't know this market existed. I thought it was so opaque, but it was a very organic sort of experience. And I guess everyone around now is sort of very happy that I've entered it. So, and I learn a lot, right, every single day. So it's been a very interesting experience.
Right. So I would eventually love to know about this transition, how it happened. But before that, alongside your professional work, you have written articles and contributed to marine expedition magazines. I saw that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what inspired that interest in writing, and how has it helped you engage with the maritime world differently?
Yeah. So, you touched on something that, takes me really a long time back. I think I was 19 or 18 when I started writing. But Manasi, it really was exposure just to new opportunities and internships. So, when you're young and you don't have an idea of what you want to do, and I think a lot of us still don't know if we're on the right path, right? It's like a ever-evolving journey. I found that out when I was, I think, 18 or 19, like I mentioned, that I wanted to write. And I wanted to explore different mediums and express myself. And, growing up, I went to art school as well. So you always sort of think, I'm not going to be analytically aligned, so I'm just going to do something creative. And I was working for the Asian Geographic magazine for a short period of time in Singapore. I did a bunch of internships there, and that was my experience to writing. And I had zero experience in writing, zero experience in the marine life world, which is what we focused on. And they tasked me with writing an end-to-end, marine expedition magazine, like a diving magazine. And I was like, oh, great, I know nothing about this. I'm not prepared, but it was quite literally sink or swim. But I had a fabulous boss who really believed in me, and he pushed me to do it. And I think that was my first exposure to the deep sea world, different elements of it, the technicalities of it. And also it pushed me to, sort of open up a bit more, be a little bit more extroverted. Interviewing people, as you know, in your profession, that a lot of it is also the research you put behind writing, learning about a new topic, especially when it's so vast, right? So that was actually the journey there. And I think that got me into being a bit more open and a bit more research oriented to new markets. So it was a very interesting internship experience I did many, many years ago.
Wow, lovely. That must have shaped entirely how you look at shipping industry now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because although unrelated, it was sort of almost like foreshadowing, because we would talk a lot about sustainability, a lot about what's happening to our planet. The edition I remember that we wrote was all about microplastics in the shipping, it's not just shipping space, sorry, the global marine space, how it's affecting wildlife. And then, of course, the impact of shipping, which is where I was getting at, right? So there was so much to explore, and that was a more technical understanding of what happens underwater and what happens because of other pollutants in the market, other activities, trade activities. So like I mentioned, a bit of foreshadowing into an industry that I would eventually end up in.
Right. But Sitaraah, you began your career outside the maritime sector, including a stint in investment banking.
Yeah.
So tell me, what motivated your transition into the shipping industry?
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't a very linear experience. I don't think I could ever describe my career as a linear experience. I started off learning, banking and finance. And before that, I was in university studying business management and finance. And I think during the time, the way I viewed the world and the opportunities that presented me and the people in my cohort were sort of leaning towards this sort of an industry. So it definitely influenced a lot of my decision making at the time. And I think the way I looked at financial markets and also shipping markets now is that, I was drawn to it because I think that it is one of the best examples of meritocracy in an industry, of really making it in a manner that is organic and that is pushy. And I'm someone who only really wants to be judged on the strength of my abilities. And of course, be paid for it, right? So,
Yes.
so those were the motivations. And when I was in banking, I was learning a little bit about commodities M&A. I was in mergers and acquisitions there, and worked on deals for very, very large tanker companies as well. So that was a project that made me expose myself to shipping. And that was also a bit of an understanding of, okay, who are the asset players in this market? How does this market move? And then, of course, with the right push and understanding how those markets evolve and move, I was like, oh, I want to see the actual physical movement within this space of logistics that is beyond just what happens in bank ledgers and, slide decks that we're doing here, etc. So I anyways ended up wanting to move out of banking eventually, but the land into shipping was unplanned.
So a little bit of curiosity is what brought you here, I must say.
Yeah, I think it's just the motivation to try something new, to see what you could explore, what markets are maybe penetrated but not very transparent, right? And when I moved back to Singapore, Mansi, I did not realize myself that Singapore is a global logistics hub. Majority of commodity trading sort of contracts are signed here. 7% of our GDP is driven by the maritime industry. So, and there's so many schools now teaching and pushing the maritime curricula and academia, which is fantastic to see, because growing up, I didn't see that exposure. I don't think I have one peer who went to a maritime university, right? So it's very different.
So nobody to guide you really, nobody who you can, talk to about, share their experiences and everything. But I'm sure your journey is going to motivate a lot of people, and especially women who are looking to enter this industry. But tell me, How short was this stint in your investment banking?
Yeah, so I really explored it for a couple of years. And it was more, like I said, driven by this desire to learn about an industry that I feel like was the right fit for me. But after spending time in it, I realized it just wasn't for me. And you spend 80-hour, 100-hour weeks working, sort of pushing yourself to find new clients, work with them. But it really does teach you something. I think if I didn't go down that route and didn't go down the route of applying and learning and meeting all those fantastic people, because you work with people of the highest caliber, right? The exposure is phenomenal. The people you meet, you learn so much from them, even just by shadowing them. Like I remember for a good 3 weeks, I just shadowed someone for coffee, right? I was just fetching them their papers and their work, but you learn the ethic and you learn the drive. And that's also something that I see at the highest regard in shipping markets, because you're always switched on, right? It's global trade. So very similar in that regard. And I don't think I would have learned grit or resilience or that kind of experience without having dabbled in the banking and then moving into shipping.
Yes, yes. But that experience must have also taught you something. So, did you carry any perspectives from finance into this field when you transitioned?
Yes. So, I think to be able to understand global shipping markets, you also fundamentally need to understand the way global trade moves. Very similar to in a financial institution, how different markets move and interplay and cause and effect, and not just the basic supply demand economics, right? So on a larger scale, research, being able to be technically adept, right? Like I mentioned to you, I was never someone who was very analytical in nature. I was always a very creative person. I was always told that I wouldn't be good at it. But that push is really, really important. I think certain soft skills you learn with respect to, like I mentioned, grit, resilience, being able to connect with people, being able to have conversations with clients and building relationships and trust, that is transferable in any industry you exist in, right? All these things are things you learn when you are shadowing people, picking it up from your mentors. So there's a lot you learn in that environment. And of course, being able to work under pressure, being able to develop. That way, I really respect a lot of my friends who are in consulting, because there's one, a lot of pressure, and two, they're so knowledgeable about different markets, right? They understand, at least a little bit of something and everything because of their exposure to their projects. So I think that is also something we were exposed to. And you remain very cognizant of the person who you're speaking to as well. So I think that is something that is, invaluable and transferable even to shipping markets.
Right, right. So who was your biggest cheerleader when you transitioned?
I think it's going to be cheesy, right? My answer, but my biggest cheerleader was definitely my mom and dad. They were integral to sort of pushing me to do anything in life, growing up. And I'm very fortunate to have a good relationship with them. I think it's only gotten better as I've aged. But it's really phenomenal to have the support for them to understand what I do, for them to be able to say, okay, there's no such thing as failure. It's just another step towards success, right? Just another step towards learning something new. And I was always taught in life to, if you want to do something, pursue it. If you want to fail at it, fail quickly, learn quickly, and move on from that, right? What experience can you take away? So I don't think there's ever a moment I didn't feel championed, although a lot of people did think I was crazy. Like, why would you work so hard and to get into banking and then move into a different industry or move into tech for that matter, right? So I think that support really matters. Someone just telling you that they believe in you and that they believe in your ambition, it can be a lot more powerful than we imagine,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think that support matters a lot, because questions will be asked, people will say things, but at the end of the day, if your family believes in you, if they are supporting you, I think nothing like it. You can succeed in life like you're doing right now.
Right, exactly.
So, Sitaraah, shipping has long been known as a relationship-driven and relatively traditional industry, right? So, over the last decade, how have you seen attitudes toward digital transformation evolve within this sector?
That's a great question. I think, like you mentioned, 10 years ago, technology in shipping wasn't what it is today, right? There were not that many market players. The industry itself was not that large. And as you may understand, the shipping industry, commercial alone, I'm not even stepping into elements of technical and seafaring, they're very fragmented. It's a largely fragmented, largely opaque market, which is why you would either chance upon it or come by word of mouth or have some family in there. So that's the nature of the industry, right? But I think shipping had this mindset, or people in shipping had this mindset that, oh, this is how it's always been done, right? If we use 15 Excel sheets to be able to calculate a certain fixture, this is how it's always been done. But I think that mentality is changing. And in the last decade, in the last 15 years, a lot of that has shifted. So there is also a generational shift that I see with people my age, slightly older to me, younger than me, entering the market. There's a new wave of practitioners who are noticing this change, who want to promote that change because old ways are also becoming a liability. And don't get me wrong, I do believe first principles are really, really important. That's what we learn in any industry. And as a good practitioner, you should know that, right? But the opportunity in technology lies in being able to amplify and scale your operations in anything that you do. So, we're not just looking at disrupting a market with technology and being generic. We're really looking to enter a field that has been traditionally very underserved and served in parts, a small segment has been focused on. So maybe just focusing on bunkering, just focusing on voyage operations, just focusing on prefixture chartering. So I think it's been too long that tech has been extremely niche and not been mainstream in being able to help, promoters and practitioners in the industry. And that is a shift I'm seeing with global companies, almost anywhere right now.
At Seven Oceans, you work closely with voyage management and chartering technology. So could you explain some of the key operational challenges in chartering and voyage planning that digital tools are helping to address today?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are quite a lot of inefficiencies in shipping, right? And that is the market opportunity that we all see. And you could see that as someone who is zoomed up from a macro lens. You could see that as someone who is in the trenches of chartering and fixing. You could see that someone who is like me in tech and sort of providing a solution to these problems. So there are a lot of gaps in the market, and where we come in as Seven Oceans is to be able to effectively plug those gaps in the market. And how and why is really the question that you're asking, right? I mean, we see teams spending, full days on being able to manage manual spreadsheets or reporting or outcomes that should ideally take seconds. And it doesn't happen the same way in other markets, right? So we also see it in examples of prefixture and post-fixture, two different elements of chartering and voyage operations, but not really married to one another. Commercial desks not really being able to hand over or talk to each other effectively. So these were all problems that we see that sound very, very pointed, but are actually very, very complex when it comes to nitty-gritty of it. So when it comes to commercial outcomes, the opportunity we see here is focusing on trade productivity, focusing on the bottom line, right? Fundamentally, in commercial operations, everyone is promoted and motivated to be able to move the bottom line, right? Fixing costs, operational expenses, voyage P&L. And all of these things impact the way that management wants to move and sort of grows the organization. So the way we look at it, for operators in the market, we stress on margin management, optimizing on those costs, day to day, and being able to play with the best outcomes. For charterers, it's all about freight cost optimization, right? If I'm a charter, I'm thinking, how can I reduce my overall, P&L in the larger commodity contract? And for brokers, I think with a product like Seven Oceans Brokerage, it's all about making sure that no dollar is left on the table.
So, Sitaraah, freight markets are shaped by a complex mix of factors, from commodity demand and geopolitics to macroeconomic shifts.
Yeah.
How should professionals interpret freight market movements beyond the basic framework of supply and demand?
Yeah, that's a great question, but it's also a bit of a complex one. Now, if I could simplify it, actually, there are 4 key markets in shipping that I feel like you have to understand in order to know how the rates are moving. So the first one is, of course, the S&P market, the new building market, that's important, the demolition market, and of course, looking at how freight moves, the freight market, right? And the way we see this and why we monitor these markets is to be able to understand that shipping and commodities is actually that central nexus of being able to move. It's like sort of almost like the heart of global capitalism. And these 4 markets, the way that they talk to one another, influences the way that we look at supply and demand in the industry. And of course, we have other factors and strategic levers like the macroeconomic impacts happening around us, the movements of geopolitical trade, like we see right now that is taking place. A very, very poignant time in the market for us. So the way these markets talk to each other impacts larger freight and supply and demand in freight markets. And when you look at why these are strategic levers in the market, it's because shipping isn't just a cost to be able to transport goods from one place to the other, right? It's truly, in the past, it's also been used as a tool for domination because people have controlled whole fleets, right? Or booking tankers years in advance, for example. Some trading houses have used that strategy in order to corner different markets to control the physical movement of products. So the macro impact is a lot larger when we look at shipping from a zoomed out lens. And, I think I was reading a book called The World for Sale by Jacques Farché. And I would highly, highly recommend anybody in shipping or commodities to read that book because it just talks about all of the historical influences in a very fun manner to read. And it talks about things like how a single tanker, a super tanker that is managed in Switzerland can actually influence global inflation as much as a central bank could probably control, right? So these are all the different economic factors that sort of go beyond just basic supply and demand in shipping and freight markets.
Wow, lovely. Thank you for also recommending a book that is going to help people and also in a fun way, like you said, because it has to be a good read at the end of the day. So Sitaraah, let's now talk about AI and data analytics. We keep hearing a lot about it, that it is transforming how industries are functioning nowadays. In the context of maritime operations and commercial decision making, where are you seeing the most practical and meaningful applications today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think AI and data, as you mentioned, data in itself is a commodity, and I think it is the hottest commodity right now in the world, irrespective of which industry you're in. So the way that it moves and the way that it benefits you is really, really important. I think that AI is only getting more and more important. Data sharing, where possible, is getting more and more poignant and important to integrate into your lives. I think AI will soon to trip in to homogenize this space strategically. So, for example, we use AI to move from more reactive choices that cause and effect choices to predictive analytics, right? So that you have more intelligent strategy. So instead of having examples of this plus this equals this, it's more like this has happened. Would you like to opt for route A or route B, option A or option B, to be able to see what the basically outcomes could be like, right? So you're looking at more of a predictive analysis. When it comes to impactful movements of AI and the way that it will sort of influence shipping at large is in the areas of hedging and risk management. Tools like Seven Oceans Hedge or SORM exist in the market, and they are focused specifically on being able to navigate these global outcomes of what if this happens in the market? How do we handle cargo risk or bunker risk or whatever that may be? And as you see in increasingly geopolitical risky environments, you need that understanding, and you want your commercial practitioners to have that understanding as well. So I think those are some interesting angles and really cool use cases where I think AI might amplify that is, like I mentioned, bunker costs, bunker prices. We call it judicious bunkering, right? How do you judiciously bunker or hedge of FFA contract? So the non-boring side of AI will focus a lot on this, in my opinion.
Right. But see, now there are a lot of digital solutions are available. They're powerful, they're efficient, but still many shipping companies still hesitate to fully adopt them. Yeah, because transition, change, as fascinating as it is also difficult for people to really adapt to it, right? So from your experience, what are the biggest barriers to adoption and how can organizations overcome them?
Yeah, that's a really big part of what we do, and I see those challenges globally every single day. And it's not just the shipping industry that sort of lacks the adoption there, I think, but it is
everywhere.
It is everywhere, right? But I think it is about shipping has just been one of the last frontiers where it's been introduced. So of course the adoption definitely slows down there. But I think we're moving out of a phase of curiosity of technology, of, oh, this exists in the market, to, oh, XYZ is using it, maybe we should, right? How are they being predictive or reactive with that strategy? That is something that I'm noticing in the market. Now, I personally grew up noticing and the movement in the tanker trade, and our CEO and a lot of our board are actually Silicon Valley veterans who felt the pinch of bad shipping software in the early days. And that was a big reason as to why the philosophy of Seven Oceans was born, to be able to have better, efficient shipping management solutions in the market that actually catered to the bottom line and that were modern and that made sense. And fundamentally, that were catered for the shipping market, because we're business users, we're not technology users, right? We built this because we lived those frustrations, we saw the pain points. And the aha moment for us was, for me at least, was when I joined Seven Oceans, was I was demoing a product, our Seven Oceans brokerage product, to a shipbroker friend. And she told me after the demo, I can tell you believe in this because you're talking the trade, you're talking shipping terminology. And the tech, it shows that. The platform shows that. It's easy for me to relate to and to understand. So that value, it really resonated with me. It made me understand that what we're building is something that the larger market appreciates. And, it really mirrors that concept, what I shared with you, Manasi, of living those frustrations and trying to solve for that problem. So a lot of people are feeling this in the market, and therefore it's moving out of curiosity to really focusing on, can we adopt this and how is it going to make our lives easier?
Right. Lovely. So, like you said, platforms like Seven Oceans provide real-time market intelligence and analytical insights. How does improved access to data change the way charterers or operators and traders approach commercial decisions nowadays?
Yeah. So there has been definitely a shift in the way that people look at this, and primarily people want commercial support, right? It's, if you're in this business, you want to ensure that there is no leakage of your data, of what you're running, right from just the fixing process into running Voyage operations and reconciling the trade finally, right? And that, of course, all pinches your bottom line. And everybody's responsibility in organization, irrespective of where or what, where you might be or what you might do, is sort of serving a responsibility to say, how can we make this trade most profitable? And how can we serve the larger goals of this company, right? So when we come in and focus on better decision making and changes in data, we want to ensure that there's total trade visibility, right? At Seven Oceans, we provide complete bottom line visibility to be able to show an organization exactly where they can grow, exactly where they can improve, or what they ought to change in order to optimize on those operations. It's very, very holistic in that regard, where rather than specialized solutions, it's an enterprise application that allows everybody to come in from whichever stakeholder they might be. You could be a chartering manager, you could be an operations guy, you could be in finance or management, and take a look at the business on a micro as well as a macro level. So that's where visibility comes in. And when it comes to sort of the impact that we're growing in the market, we really want to build products that sort of grow at their own legacy and capacity with our customers, and to make sure that revenue for different customers is maximized across the board, whether they're owners or operators, whether they're charterers, whether they're brokers. Their unique needs are met in order to grow the business and that we grow with them. And today, I think we have about 10,000 users, if not more, that sort of are benefiting from this logic.
Great. So given there is volatility in every market, I must say. So given this scenario, how can analytics and predictive tools help the companies manage risk and make more informed strategic decisions? Like now more than 10,000 people are already doing so. Mm-hmm. So what would you like to tell the rest of the companies that are still thinking about it, whether to adapt and whether to go ahead with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there is a sense of suspicion in the market as to whether is something really going to benefit us. What is the real ROI or return on investment for us with this tool or with this kind of a platform, and how will it really help us scale, right? Because we're so used to seeing cause and effect in a very black and white scenario. But the same logic we use to maybe hedge freight markets, the same logic we use to maybe understand war risk or geopolitical risk when we trade in those waters is the same way you have to look at a tool in shipping, is that it's not just going to be a near-term benefit with respect to organization and responsibility within my organization or within my company. It's also about being able to manage volatility, see and measure that from a macro lens, years in advance or months in advance, right? And volatility, like you mentioned, it creates risk, but there's also opportunity for those people who are prepared. And that's exactly what we try to do with, an organization like Seven Oceans and our products, because there's always a burden of something in the industry that is unseen. It could be compliance, it could be, like I mentioned, different geopolitical risks, it could be changing and evolving markets, it could be internal organizational issues, right? So we help handle all of that at a click of a button, right? And generationally, people have done this manually. And I have a great deal of respect for people who have done that. But the way we look at the industry evolving to do more and to scale more organically and also faster, these kinds of tools sort of only amplify that movement. And so we help with handling all sorts of things, even things like compliance regulations like EU ETS and CII and CO2 the dollars and measuring them. And so fundamentally, any organization needs that profit protection, right? That's where we're coming with our tools, to be able to uncover unseen costs, manage those taxes or the movement of money, being able to stop any kind of leakage over there, and improve trade efficiency even when a market is haywire. So that's really where we're going with respect to managing volatility.
Wow, lovely. So I think it's a great way to look at it, because at the end of the day, everybody is into the business to increase their profitability for sure.
Exactly.
Now let's move on to something you're really passionate about, your area of interest, I must say, sustainability and future.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sustainability and decarbonization have become central topics in global shipping. So in what ways do you think can digital technologies and smarter voyage management contribute to reducing the emissions and improve operational efficiency?
Yeah, no, you're so right in the sense that it is a market buzz today. More people are talking about sustainability than ever. And often I think we get caught up in talking about sustainability versus doing something about it, which is also a reason why we have all these regulations and compliances in place, and especially in places like the EU. And I think it's a good thing. Of course, it does disrupt the nature of trade and the way that we trade, but it also makes us more responsible. It focuses on making sure that we act more responsibly as commercial practitioners. And historically, not everyone has done that, right? There are very switched on people who care about this, but there are also people who do not look beyond the confines of the office and say that, okay, what's happening on the ship or what's happening, around the world, not really my problem. And that's not the way that, we want to drive the world forward either for our youth. So when I look at efficiency, I looking at how can we make this industry as hyper efficient. And to me, a hyper efficient industry is also a greener one. It's the logic here is that you cannot reduce emissions without first fixing idle ships and any kind of suboptimal routing that might be there. And that all creates not just a lack of profitability, but it's sort of twofold. It's not profitable for you. At the same time, it's not great for the environment, right? So when it comes to managing real-time compliance, we help folks like owners and operators sort of track emissions real time and optimize for them, and as well as make sure that it is a profitable voyage for them. But it's also complying with the world regulations, making sure that we're a bit more responsible towards the future of our planet, and just sort of balancing both sides of the scale. And that is important for anybody trading globally now. It's only going to get more important down the line with a lot of change, both in terms of the pressure coming in from governments and governing bodies, but also just personally when we think about how we want to operate more responsibly for the future of our world. So I think that is something that we have put into the application and we've always considered. And it's very, very important also to remain market compliant because, like I mentioned, it hurts the bottom line of the people that you work with. And ideally, you want them to be the best at what they do. So that's really where we're headed with that.
Yes, yes, and it's our responsibility as human beings that we are taking a lot from the nature, and we should really look after how much resources we are utilizing and what are we doing in turn for the nature. So this is something that I think every shipping industry should adopt.
I totally agree, Mansi. I also feel that it's not about what you do, from a large scale perspective. You don't have to stop and reach net zero
Start
by a certain
small.
time. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're an operator, start small. If you're an operator, you can sort of manage costs in a certain manner. If you are an owner, how can you sort of optimize from your end? It's just about taking initiative and responsibility and setting a new precedent. And that, I think, just earns so much respect for everybody globally. And I think the shipping world has already changed. They're evolving, they're adopting. We have people coming up with new, cleaner fleets of vessels as well. A lot of people investing a lot of time, energy, and money into that. That's really heartening to see.
Really, really good to know that. Good to know that. So now let's talk about your achievements. You've recently been recognized among the top 100 women in shipping, and just great pleasure to even say that. I'm sure it feels amazing. What does this recognition represent for you personally, and how do you see the role and representation of women evolving within the maritime industry?
Thank you so much. I'm fundamentally a very shy person, so I don't take
I don't think so.
compliments.
I don't think so.
I don't take compliments very well, but I really appreciate you saying that. It wasn't expected, Manasi, honestly. There are so many women who have not been recognized for the incredible work that they do every single day. And there are so many subsectors within shipping itself. There's just from the commercial side, there's so many segments within dry and wet. On the technical side, there's so many people working in crewing, in being able to work on the ship management element of it. Seafaring women, I'm not even getting close to describing sustainability, how many people are really involved in keeping the world moving, right? So it is really wonderful to be part of that and to be recognized for it. It is truly an honor. But I think it also shows us that the definition of what leaders or movers in maritime looks like is evolving. Traditionally, it has definitely been an industry you would see someone like your dad in, right? Or someone
Yes, yes.
who, doesn't represent you, which is, I think, moving away from older learned behaviors to a more meritocratic environment. And I think that's something I mentioned a lot earlier, today speaking to you, that emulation of what truly a meritocratic environment looks like today in shipping is evolving. And it's so nice to see that. And so I'm really grateful for people who have championed me to be able to reach there, whether it's clients, partners, friends, and this is both men and women. So there is an evolution in mindset, right? I see more women today in commercial trading roles, heading chartering divisions, creating houses, doing fantastic work, irrespective of their background and their age. And you didn't see that maybe even 20 years ago, right? So a lot of evolution has happened there. And I see it in my personal network. And that's really, really nice to see. It's very heartening. It also shows you that you're welcome in this industry.
Yes.
So there is definitely a lot more work to do. Even industries like finance, I would say, have more women than industries like shipping. And these are notoriously traditional. But that just means we have a responsibility to keep pushing our impact and moving our impact forward.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, do you have more girls or women approaching you asking about how it has been for you, how your journey has been, for guidance, tips, advice, maybe?
Funnily enough, I feel like a lot of men have connected to me after that, saying, "Oh, congratulations, But no, I think that it definitely bridges a certain gap, right? I think it takes away a certain stigma as well. I think there is a certain hierarchical nature also with the way that the industry operates, thinking that, if you have reached a certain level, how approachable are you? Can I speak to you? Can we have sort of a mentor-mentee relationship? It's not as easy to approach people to do that. And it's not that easy to find someone who can comply with you. But, ever since I made the list, I definitely have connected with a lot more women. I think I connected with like 100 women on LinkedIn in one day. not just from the list, but outside the list. And women not from shipping, but other industries, in industries like yours or in media or technology or whatever it may be, coming to me and saying that, oh, this is great, and also it's great PR for the shipping industry at large, right? I mean, it promotes more people to say this exists. I had a message come into me, I think second or third day after it was announced, by a young girl in India who mentioned that she just ended up at a broker shop, and that it's nice to see women, younger women in positions taking responsibility and leading, and that she really liked the fact that she found out that, my mother was once in shipping and I am now. And so there's that transition there in women stepping up a little bit more. So that was so nice to see from someone who, genuinely wants to make an impact in the market. And also nice to see that, she's taking a leap of faith in her own personal learning journey. I quite liked that when she reached out, and it was a lovely bonding moment.
Wow, lovely. I think a lot more people are connecting with you on LinkedIn nowadays, and that you're really involved. You're actually checking all the messages and all. It's really nice of you to do that. It comes full circle. Yes, absolutely. That is one really important takeaway that people should take from this conversation. Now, moving ahead, let's talk about the multiple stakeholders and all. So, shipping is inherently global and involves multiple stakeholders. There are ship owners, there are charterers, there are traders, and technology providers. So, how important is the collaboration between these players in driving meaningful innovation and transformation, according to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, and not a question that I feel I'm asked at all or often enough. I think it's really a nexus, the way that I look at this, right? That there's real transformation required in order to move the impact of people in commercial trading. And that requires what I would call a triangulation between ship owners, charterers, and technology providers, right? Because your principles are moving this market and you have all these other elements at play. But because there are so many elements and other stakeholders at play as well, it largely remains fragmented and unseen. And that, of course, impacts the operations of the principals involved, if you're a charterer, if you're an owner-operator, and even if you're a broker, right? Because these are all things that you need to have visibility over. And that's where tech providers come in. That's where technology platforms come in, right? Like what we do. It's really about breaking those silos because everyone's operating in those silos. And if tech is not solving your commercial reality for all of these three stakeholders I mentioned, then I think it's just a toy, right? Then we're just solving very small, very niche problems, with respective organizations adopting what they need, but it's not looking at the big picture. And I think where you see success in technology and shipping is when you create a universe of impact that allows different stakeholders to come together and do their jobs better than what they're doing today. So I think that is really, really important to break those different silos and act as a bridge, act as a connection to make sure that the supply chain remains more resilient and more efficient. That's really where you can get the maximum impact or ROI from a tech platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is very important. And now, like you said, you did not have any guidance or anybody who you can talk to about, how it is going to be when you thought about entering this industry. So, from a third person's perspective, it really seems very fascinating, the entire shipping industry. But looking at your journey, there must have been challenges, there must have been some surprises maybe along the journey. So, for young professionals or individuals from outside the maritime sector who are now interested in entering the industry today, like a lot of DMs are there in your inbox. So, what skills, mindset, or knowledge areas would you say are the most important to develop for these newcomers?
I think there's definitely an advantage to being an outsider. Why I would sort of request people to look at it from that lens is because if you isolate yourself from the industry and think that you're not as good, you will not have that faith in yourself to push harder and to perform better, right? And more often than not, now I'm coming across people who are ex-banking, ex-tech. Now, I have a client I work with who I'm very close to. His name's KT. He is ex-engineering, he's ex-tech, and he's a writer, and he's got this wealth of knowledge and experience, and then he stumbled across working in shipping, and now he's a tanker charterer. So the journey is fantastic, and there's a lot more you can probably learn and extract from on the softer elements of how you build relationships in shipping than just the shipping jargon and the knowledge. Like for my own journey, it was an accidental path more so. I did have influences around me that sort of could have pushed me to understand shipping markets better, but I didn't know that. I didn't leverage them, and I didn't know how to, right? So I think coming from the outside, you also see a lot of gaps amongst various stakeholders. Like in my journey, it was the exact same. It was fascinating because you see gaps, right? If you're a broker, you know exactly what's happening between a charterer and an owner, and it's your responsibility to bridge that gap and advocate for what's right. That I feel like is the essence of a good broker who can really bring out and leverage both sides and have positive outcomes for everybody than just fixing a deal, right? So if you look at it in that regard, I think you have an advantage. And I think it's also important to have hybrid skills. Right, what do I mean by that? I think you need the mindset of a commercial practitioner, which means, of course, having a good understanding of shipping markets or geopolitical markets, right? Learning, being curious, I would say, is really important. So technical literacy or data analysis is good, but it is not your biggest advantage. Your biggest advantage is how you build those relationships, how you build trust in a market that's ever evolving, because that is also what will probably propel you in the future when markets are difficult and you have to fix with known people. You want them to have faith in you to deliver, and you want them to champion you also when you're at your lowest, right? And it's a cutthroat market and business to be in. So being able to have both the technical and the softer elements of knowledge is very important to leverage and be the best you probably can be, especially if you didn't grow up around shipping, learning the terms.
True. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that is going to help a lot of our audience who's watching us right now and who are interested in entering the industry, especially newcomers who are outsiders, who do not have any background so far. Now, we talked about AI and digitization some time back. It is still evolving like any other technology, let's say. But let's say if AI or digitization reaches its full potential, how do you see shipping evolving over the next decade in that case?
Oh, that's a great question. We're working and living in a world where technology is really outpacing all of us, right? I don't think 5 years ago I knew something like ChatGPT or Claude would come out, right? But unfortunately for the common consumer like you and I, people have been working on this technology for the longest time, and we've just not been privy to it. So AI has existed in the market for, I think, over 10 years now, and people didn't know what to call it or name it because it was so nascent. So I would say that there has been a good amount of growth in that environment, and where we're headed over the next decade with these tools, AI and digitization, when they reach their peak, which is beyond this phase of Gen AI where we're in right now, we'll see a move towards more surgical empowerment, a more precise use case of it, even in markets like ours, where AI is very nascent. I would say that there is still a lot of hype around AI than actual deliverables, because when you work in industries like shipping and things are moving in silos, there has to be a relevant amount of training of that data and a relevant amount of use case applications that are pointed to each and every operator's use case. And that's not easy to train, not easy to develop. So people who are doing that are doing great work. And I think that where it's headed, every single decision is effectively going to be data backed and efficient moving forward. There's going to be a requirement for speed in that transition. Already, I see people asking me questions like, can I upload a PDF and it like completely takes care of the entire CP for me on the platform and runs through the trade? And I was like, we're not there yet, buddy. Like, there's a way to go about,
Yeah.
right? But that is possible, yes. And there are companies doing that, right? And with respect to global ambition, where it's headed, we'll see even more transparent uses of data. Right now, data is incredibly opaque in the shipping industry. And that's been a really big leverage point for a lot of stakeholders. We're going to be able to make data parsing and data movement more transparent, more profitable, right? And we want to also focus on the way that I see AI being focused on in this industry is connecting these different fragmented sort of elements of the market with more modern tools. And, I wouldn't be so far as to say that there will be things like marketplaces, exchanges down the line. Of course, the technicalities of this are far more complex to achieve, but the ambition is certainly there. And I see people in the industry creating these things. And the future in technology really lies in having a centralized backbone, a centralized and a unified sort of database and backbone and sort of universe of products that caters to the different elements of the market, because that is the only thing that is going to focus on making sure that the market is not fragmented, right? So when we hear the word fragmentation, or anybody in tech or in this technology segment of shipping and tech wants to create something new, I would say look at fragmentation not as a problem to just tackle something small, but look at it as an opportunity to zoom out and create something much larger, because that is where you will benefit the most number of people.
Yeah. But do you at any point do you think AI will be able to replace any sector of shipping industry entirely?
This is a very hot question, right? You're asking a very difficult question.
I just want to know your opinion. just
No, that's a good question. Actually, I think TradeWinds covered this recently over a piece of news. I think the news coverage they did a couple months ago, where they had a few technology people and a few people from broker shops and chartering backgrounds over a forum or a panel, who were basically asking, is AI going to replace the shipbroker? Or is AI going to replace the chartering manager, right? And I found that very interesting. The answer for me would be not right now. It's not the most optimistic outlook. I don't think that you could 100% replace a relationship-driven industry. And even when you think about autonomous shipping and more sort of predictive sides of that, I still think that there's a long way to go there within our industry, because everything has to be managed with the greatest sense of granularity, and that in effect can only be done by a human. Right? Autonomous shipping is a very dangerous territory to go towards. Right? It's not as easy as autonomous cars, for that matter, right? Similarly, in the commercial side, it might be easier to plug certain gaps and inefficiencies, but there will never fundamentally be a way to completely replace a broker, completely replace a chartering manager, because a large amount and volume of the business is largely physical, right? It is largely physical. So AI and data can really help you achieve what you want to achieve, but it will not replace you, at least not in the short term.
And I hope it doesn't.
Right? We need more people.
We need more people, because just like any other industry, I think it is relationship driven, and trust, relationship, these are the things that human beings can build over the years, and no technology can replace that.
Exactly. And this is not just a problem that we see in shipping, right, Manasi? We see this in healthcare technology, in education technology, in general use cases of larger consumer technology, because people would go to, I see a big growth angle for the therapy and sort of medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry to sort of come into an angle of selling more on these sort of generative AI platforms, LLM platforms. How many people today use ChatGPT or Gemini as a personal therapist, right? Oh, I just had a fight with my boyfriend. What do I say to him? Right? Or this is how I feel. So a lot of reliance is there, but from a commercial angle, I think there's still a lot of hype around it, like you mentioned. And you can never fully trust an AI until it starts emulating certain human qualities like empathy, right? That is not easy to replicate, at least not at this stage. And there's a long way to go to even reach that stage on a general level, let alone a more specialized use case in shipping. So there's definitely certain things that cannot be replaced, like you rightly mentioned, that I don't think will be taken for the longest time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now coming to the end of our conversation, a quick rapid fire. This is my favorite part.
Yeah.
So one technology trend that will change maritime fastest.
Data transparency.
Okay.
Data transparency is the biggest blocker right now. It will be the death of data asymmetry.
Dry bulk, tankers or containers, most interesting market today.
I might be biased, but tankers. I think the volatility is what makes risk management and pricing and that entire piece so much more interesting. And we're seeing that right now. So there's always something going on in that market.
Yes, yes. One skill every young maritime professional should learn today.
Oh, that's a good question.
Of course, there must be multiple, but one thing that you think is a must.
Yeah. I mean, the traditional answer would be data literacy, but I would say take initiative. Initiative is the biggest skill. What I mean by that is go beyond. Don't just do a follow-up for your boss or work with them in a certain manner for your team. Try your best to take initiative to find a solution to something, even if you fail. That will sort of grow respect for you within an organization, and it will show the team that you're capable of handling a lot more as you learn and you grow. So I think initiative is the biggest sort of skill that would propel you towards growth and personal growth, and it's appreciated anywhere you go in the world.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Good one. One myth about the shipping industry that you would like to break.
That it's very traditional and that it's very slow. I think that it's actually a very fast moving and dynamic industry. And by fast moving, I mean that you just never know what might come, and something that an analyst might say might not actually be the case. It's not very similar to financial markets. It's not necessary that a rating on a certain angle or a certain rate would actually happen, right? A lot of times that's proven wrong. So you really have to be able to analyze that for yourself. And the interesting part is doing that for yourself, right? What your take is. So it is a very high stakes game as well. So it's really about a gamble on these sort of different markets that you operate in and how you choose to maneuver that. So it's actually a lot more interesting than people care to admit.
Okay. The biggest challenge shipping will face in the next 5 years, according to you?
I think it would be the fragmented geopolitical landscape that we're operating in. And as you see that it impacts almost every single kind of trade and growth and the common consumer like yourself and I deeply, and especially impacted by the nature of energy transition because that will send shockwaves through the world.
Absolutely. One quality that defines great leadership in shipping?
I think the ability to challenge, to stand up and go against the grain and say, I don't believe in that and I think that's wrong and I'm not going to sit silent on it for anything. It could be about the market. It could be about the way you choose to run your operation. It could be about the way that you nurture your teams or you stand up for people. And traditionally, we have seen strong leaders, but they have been more dominant than they have been holistically strong and robust. And so let's try to redefine that into good qualities of leadership that actually foster a better working environment as well.
Yes, yes. Now the next one, we have actually talked extensively about it, but AI in shipping, hype or real transformation?
I want to say hype right now. I think that there is a lot of development that is leading towards good growth.
Yes.
But very few firms are doing pointed work with AI that will benefit not just short-term outcomes like intelligence, but long-term stuff. Long-term, yes, it is not hype, it is real. And as long as it's solving a core issue like maybe the bottom line, it is real.
Okay. If you had to describe the future of maritime in one word, what would it be?
Oh, I really have to think for this one. Unprecedented. You can just never know necessarily what's happening. You can have an idea of it, but you're effectively betting against different markets, right? So it's definitely unprecedented, but unprecedented does not mean boring.
That was it, Sitaraah. It was lovely talking to you. And
Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, your journey is going to inspire a lot of people, I'm sure, and it was my pleasure having you here today.
Thank you so much, Manasi. It's been such a wonderful time getting to know you and speak to you as well. And I really enjoyed the conversation that we had today. I've had a lot to reflect on.
Yes, yes, I enjoyed it too. I enjoyed it too thoroughly. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Take care.